Thank you very much. I am very, very honored to have been invited here for this very important anniversary of one of the facilitators and actors of the creation of the single market, because that is the case for affordable medicines Europe. And this is also an opportunity which allows us to try and look at the long-term future of our single market. But before trying to do that, looking in the future, allow me to go a long way back, because I believe it was exactly in this very room at the time belonging to the European Parliament that I was scrutinized during my confirmation hearing to become Commissioner of the Internal Market in January 1995, not without emotion and fear, but I understand that I did pass that examination. The internal market is an incredible success story, and maybe its inspiring principles are too simple, although dramatically difficult to implement, for the internal market to be still appreciated and valued at the time when we have many other planets and stars in the universe of our reflections about Europe, all of which necessarily carry the adjective strategic next to them. And the internal market is old stuff. When I was asked, after my time at the Commission in 2010, by then Commissioner Barroso to prepare for him a report on a new approach to the single market, I always prefaced my conversations on this topic that I did in all the member states that unfortunately the single market, by the way, I always called it single. I realized that internal market may be legally more appropriate, but I didn't care about this. I always said in the 90s when I started dealing with this topic that single, well, that the internal may convey to outsiders the idea that it is closed. I remember so many concerns in Washington and Tokyo at the time. Beijing was not on the map. And it was Peking. That they were all fearing Fortress Europe. I always made the case, no, we are not an internal market, but we aim to be a single market, which conveys also the ambition, the difficult ambition of being single, so integrated. At any rate, internal or single, that thing is definitely grey, a lot bureaucratic, boring, and definitely unsexy. So this is the great difficulty of attracting, for example, the minds and the hearts of our heads of states and governments on this nitty-gritty that is the single market. But they love, I have come to know them a bit, having been one of them for a little while, they love not to be forced to be too close with the issues of the single market, because if they were to be exposed with their figure to the successes or failure of the single market, they would have to be much bolder in moving towards European integration and less benevolent with their companies, with their various corporative bodies within their country to accept or erect obstacles against the free flow of goods and all the rest that you know. So it's a success story, and the story of affordable medicines Europe really shows what to me was at the time, but still is, as I look from distance now to the single market, the ideal, correct way of companies and their associations to interact with governments and policy institutions. That is, to claim for what they have the right to. It was always very helpful in my 10 years at the Commission to have those entities, companies, association of companies, come and complain. Not always the complaints were worthwhile, but at any rate, you, I can say this specifically, you, Mr. President, you, Mr. Secretary General, you, Affordable Medicines Europe, have become one of the implementers of the single market. What a difference this pattern of behavior between companies and public authorities, what a difference relative to what we observe more and more today, when companies and their associations go more and more often, yes, to authorities, but to their national authorities, to seek protections from threats which may be real or largely the product of imagination many times. And there is nothing like imagining a catastrophe and telling it to a politician to impress the politician. When I stood firm with the end of the duty-free system on internal flights at the natural deadline, because then with a single market in place, it would have been ludicrous to continue to have the tax advantages. There were demonstrations here in Brussels at the same time, because this is the ability of sometimes businessmen and unions to make a coalition out of fear to impress the authorities that, like was the case here, with the threat of 100 and the fear of 180,000 unemployed at the moment of dismantling of the single market, that would be, how could the Commission stick to that? We did stick to that as a matter of principle. And I think that airports and companies in that business have found other ways to prosper without a fragmentation in the single market. Now, I must say that our founding fathers put through the Treaty of Rome pretty powerful instruments in the hands of the Commission, although they are traditional and not very creative instruments, but the rules on the internal market and the rules on competition are very, very powerful. Coming here, I had to dig in my memory, and to facilitate this, well, I did not go into artificial intelligence, but simply I Googled parallel trade Monti. with the name hopefully being not the object of parallel trade, but the protector of parallel trade. And up comes this article of 16th of May 2001. Drug giants chew bitter pill over parallel traders as union heads for enlargement. The European Commission last week shot down an attempt by GlaxoSmithKline to prevent middlemen from cashing in on different drug price regimes across the Union. Peter Chapman speaks to two EU policy experts, etc. Few were surprised last week when European Commission antitrust chief, for once not Tsar, chief only, Mario Monti, decided to stop drugs giant GlaxoSmithKline from thwarting the parallel trade in its products. It was out of question, said Monti, that Glaxo should be able to prevent pharmaceuticals wholesalers from buying cheap medicine in Spain, where government intervention keeps the price very low, and selling it at a profit in countries where price is higher. But you could almost hear the sighs of frustration coming down the road from DG Enterprise, the business-friendly arm of the Commission, headed by Monti's compatriot Fabio Colasanti, whom I remember with great affection. The former Prodi cabinet man, whose brief takes in pharmaceuticals, would not be so rude as to criticize Monti's judgment. Clearly, I don't see that Monti had a choice, Colasanti says, pointing out that his department was fully consulted by the trust buster and his team, etc., etc., etc. So, when the instruments are there, it may be unpleasant in some respects, pleasant in other respects, but the instruments are there to be used. And if an institution has powers and does not use them fully in order, for example, to please member states or to please powerful companies, and member states, after all, are the shareholders of the Commission, but they set up the Commission in order for the Commission occasionally to reprimand them. And if powers are not used, then they are lost gradually. So let me conclude my remarks by saying that having had the enormous fortune of working on the single market with both hands, internal market first and competition secondly. And I was lucky also in the order of the succession, because had I started with the most powerful tool, competition, and ended up with a tool that exhausts the patience of the one who uses it, because infringement procedures and then bring a country to the court, etc., as the President will tell us, is very, very time-consuming. And so, in the meantime, the obstacle to the single market remains in place until the court eventually orders the member state to remove it. Whereas in competition, if you prohibit a merger, that merger is not consumed. When we prohibited here in Brussels the merger between General Electric and Honeywell in 2002, which was already approved in Washington, two American-based companies, not only did not the merger take place in Europe, but even in the US it was dismantled, it was not consummated, because the economics of the deal, taking away the huge internal market of Europe, here is the strategic asset that Europe has and that it tends to forget at the time where it is rightly discussing strategic autonomy and geopolitical challenges. Give me another area where the US or other multinational companies are respecting the Commission and the European Union, like competition or trade or monetary policy, not because they are run by Superman, but simply because these are the areas where the member states decided time ago to give central powers. Okay, now what I fear is that the pressures deriving from the geopolitical threats, which are there, which must not be denied, and I welcome the forthcoming European Council discussion on the Commission's economic security communication, but please do not, member states and Commission, do not give up, do not allow that the concerns, often very well founded, sometimes not, of companies about IRA from the US or other concerns from China be dealt with through more and more disorder state aid, because this really erodes the basis of competitiveness of Europe. And you see, an activity like the one of Affordable Medicines Europe, of which you may have heard on occasions, benefits everybody, well, except temporarily some large companies, because it brings lower prices for consumers and, as was said, lower costs for national health services. But what is the spillover effect from more and more state aid? Not EU aid, but state aid allowed by the Commission. It's a fragmentation of the single market, a discrimination between countries with a deep pocket and countries without much of a fiscal space. And then there is a wonderful, unique country which I admire most, which believes belongs with another country to those with a huge fiscal space, and for this reason presses for more flexibility on state aid, except that looking at the numbers, it does not have all that fiscal space, unlike its eastern neighbor. But France is like that. Who could ever attack France? An overuse of state aid, unlike what you did with affordable medicines, brings higher taxes for all citizens and for all companies, plus the distortions to the single market. Now, my last sentence will be an appeal to those who will make important decisions at the Commission and at the European Council. It's very good, I think, to have thought and devised tools for intervention in order not to weaken the strategic position of Europe and of European companies vis-à-vis huge non-European powers. But if in order to cope with that, it is felt as strictly indispensable to resort also to more flexibility for national state aid, then please make a compensation for that. What would be the compensation? At the same time, remove obstacles that are still there to the intra-EU movement and all that. Maybe consider eliminating some clauses that are still there that allow member states to protect themselves and their companies even from intra-EU investments, takeovers, etc., and step up enforcement. So maybe we could use the unwelcome pressure coming on Europe from the East and from the West in a way that brings us to more effective unity. If we will allow that pressure to scare us and to react, to have a reaction of Europeans through actions that will separate countries and sectors and fragment the ones from the others, well, we will have thought that we were putting in place a bold strategic initiative, but we would be simply creating for the US or China or both a highway telling us divide et impera. Thank you very much.